So guys, what are the best decks in DUNE? Well, we've had a huge meta shake-up, so it's really interesting to see where things are going to land. Now, to start off with, I'd say Kashtira is still the best deck. Nothing really comes close. Its ability to play a small compact engine with a lot of hand traps is going to be really good as we move into a hand trap format. And then on top of that, Kashtira's just got a really obnoxious win condition. Remember, it's got Dimensional Barrier, it's got the Rise Heart, it's got Kashtira Buff, Dimensional Barrier, Dimension Shifter. I mean, Kashtira is just insane, so that's not going to change. It's definitely going to be a deck to watch out for. Another deck that I think is still going to be very strong this format is Pearly. Pearly has only gotten better. It was a little bit weaker last format because of the nerfs. However, with the release of the new Noir monster, allowing Sleepy Memory to actually be a starter, the deck gets so much stronger. It's really hard to contend with. Makes a great board going first, cracks any board going second, or just straight out kills you. Definitely one to watch out for. And I really feel like these by far are the two strongest decks. Everything else just comes a little bit below that. So let's go into some of the other decks. Start off with Runex. So this is actually a Runic generator build, and I think this is going to be high tier 2. It's going to be high tier 2, but I'm going to put in one to watch as well. Runic generator is actually a really interesting variant of Runic that in the past wasn't really that relevant. It wasn't something you would look at, but Runic just got a new monster called Sleipnir, and Sleipnir is a level 9, meaning every single Runic spell becomes an extender. Now this is really good because Generator before had a little bit of trouble with actually accessing a lot of its big monsters in rank 9s on its own turn. Now it does it super easy, and the Runic cards are good anyway, meaning that you have interesting efficiency in the Generator deck now because you have extension and utility in the same card that you can play. So look, definitely one to watch. I think it will end up being high tier 2, but yeah, watch out for that. Now, Runic Pure or Runic Stun, I'm going to say is going to be high tier 2 as well. I think Stun is actually going to be a relatively feasible strategy this format. As we move back into a hand trap format, we have a lot of combo decks. However, a slight disadvantage is Eradicator still in the format, and we do have some very crazy powerful combo decks, and Runic doesn't really like that. It doesn't do well because it can't play hand traps. Sometimes you will just get FTK'd. I mean, you can't stun your opponent if they hand loop you for 5, as Synchron can do sometimes. So Runic Stun, while I think it's feasible, it's probably going to be high tier 2. Now, Runic Sprite, Runic Live Twin, Runic Sprite Live Twin, whatever you want to call it, I'm also going to say at most bottom of tier 1.5. The beginning of formats tend to be unsolved, and so I think as the format goes on, this is going to drift down to tier 2. But to start off with, I think it's fair to say bottom of tier 1.5. It's okay. It's not going to be dominating anyone, but if you're good at this deck already and you have already, no reason to kick it off. It still is going to put in work. And I think Runic Fur High is about the same. It's doing a similar thing as that deck. Moving on to Flunderies, I'm actually going to put Flunderies as kind of a middle of tier 2. The problem with Flunderies really comes down to the fact that it's just too bricky and it doesn't have an unfair win condition anymore outside of Dustar and like not Dustar, Featherstorm in games 2 and 3. And so what you're going to find a lot with Flunderies is even if you do combo, it's not enough to stop your opponent, and going second, your Broad Breakers won't be enough to stop your opponent, and your deck is so bricky that you can't run a huge amount of hand traps. So while Flander is a good deck, mid tier 2 at best for me. Next we have Punk Gold Pride, and I think that's another mid tier 2 deck. It's a good deck, don't get me wrong. In fact, I wouldn't even say mid tier 2. I'm actually going to put Gold Pride, Punk and Rogue. It's a good deck, don't get me wrong. However, when Gold Pride Punk fully combos off, it's not even the most uncrackable board. It's good. It's going to have a Barone. Sometimes they'll have a Dragite. They'll usually have 2 to 3 pops in the fusion. And it's got interesting interactions with Kashtira by putting a token on your board and things. But still, fundamentally, for a combo deck, it is not amazing. And I always say this, there's usually only room for 1 to 2 very powerful combo decks. And this is a rare format where there's maybe more than 1 to 2. But the 3 combo decks I would say that are the best this format are all insane. Gold Pride Punk doesn't come close to any of them, unfortunately. But the first insane combo deck is going to be Mannadium. Mannadium is very good. They've just got so much support. All of the Visas, the archetypes, have this thing where they just get loads and loads of good support over time, similar to the branded decks. And so Mannadium has got more and more support, to the point now where with the counter trap and the new level 8 synchro that searches it, they've got loads of one-card combos. And then on top of that, they actually play quite well through hand traps. They have ways to dodge hand traps with Riem Heart and things like that. And allows this deck, I would say, to settle at a high tier 1.5. The other thing that's nice is this deck has versatility where you can do Crimson Dragon knocks, or you can just do a standard huge negate board. And then having a counter trap on top of that means that even if your opponent has a board breaker, it's not enough sometimes. Definitely a deck to watch out for. It's also got interesting grind, and Visas Astrolaud is such an amazing card as well. It's one of the few decks that can easily access this, which is very good, because that card can crack boards like no man's business. If you let it go back to them, they'll summon that card 2 or 3 times and just kill you, which is crazy. crazy. So yeah, definitely a tier 1.5. Mechanco, I'm going to say, is going to be mid to low rogue. The problem with Mechanco, I would say, is twofold. Firstly, it's a going second strategy that has to play bricks. Ritual decks have to play bricks. Now, Mechanco is more efficient than most ritual decks, but it still has to play bricks, which really limits how effective you can be when you have to play cards that don't do anything or don't break a board by themselves. Then on top of that, engines such as Incantations, Dogmatica, all of these engines are terrible with Kashtira on the format, terrible with Draw on the format, and yeah, those things are really big mainstays. When Kashtira leaves the format, and if Draw becomes less popular, this might bump up to tier 2 because it is a good ritual deck, and it is a good going second strategy, but for now it's just not efficient enough. So Sprite, pure Sprite / Sprite Melfi, I would say that out of the Sprite variants, I'd probably put it maybe higher than the Runic variants in tier 1.5. In fact, I'm actually going to bump both of these Runic variants down to tier 2. So the thing about pure Sprite that I like, and that it has over the other Sprite variants, is really comes down to cards like Nimble Beaver and being able to OTK you with Shadow Mosquito. The other Sprite variants can do this too, but they have less space for it. And pure Sprite plays very, very well in a hand trap format. Sprite is the kind of deck that it can't get nibbed, and Ash, Veiler, Imp, and while these are all good, you Ash their first card and they just summon another level 2 because they summon any level 2. Then you imperm that, then they go into Gigantic. Then they go into Sprint. Then you negate that, then they go into Gigantic. Sprite always can play through hand traps very, very effectively, can play a compact engine. You add in Melfi and it has different layers of interaction. A very, very good deck. I actually think it was probably Sleeper best deck last format, but now it's been knocked down a little bit. I think the new combo decks do kind of have the ability to overwhelm Sprite, and it's not going to be easily be able to play going second into them, but it's still a very good deck. Heroes, guys, look, you're going to hear it first. Normally Heroes is somewhere down here in bad. I'm actually going to put Heroes right at the top of tier 2. I think Heroes is very, very good right now, and it really comes down to a lot of the new support they've gotten. They've got essentially a Tri-Brigade Revolt now, which is an amazing card. Dark Claw is a thing. DP, they're one of the few decks can access DP, and DP is actually still a very, very busted card. I mean, they just have so many different ways to kill you, and they can actually set up relevant boards going first. Plasma is still a thing as well. Plasma just defeats a lot of decks right off if your opponent's not prepared for it. So yeah, definitely a deck to watch out for. I do think Heroes is good. I don't know if it will get above tier 2. While its turn 1 board is good, it's not unbeatable. It still loses to Nib. It still finds it hard to break boards, sometimes going second. If you get deburied, it sucks like Branded. But it is a good deck. Definitely an interesting one. If you like Heroes, go play it. Live Twin. So this is talking more about pure Live Twin, and I'd say that's probably going to be low rogue. I don't think pure Live Twin is worth talking about. But then Unchained. So there's 2 Unchained. So I'm going to talk about Unchained, pure, and variants, other variants that aren't Live Twin, I think are going to be rogue as well. I think Unchained is very, very good. However, a slight challenge Unchained has always had is dealing with non-destructive removal. A lot of the times its engine completely falls apart if you super poly or nib or whatever. And they also don't like hand traps that much. They can dodge them very well, but still, if you droll them, if you nib them, if you ash them, it's not great for them. And that's going to hurt Unchained a lot. However, when you mix in Unchained with engines like Live Twin especially, I do think it has the ability to kind of come up, and I would say it's a mid to high tier 2 deck. Unchained is very, very interesting as well, as it's a deck that has inbuilt super polys effectively. When you think about the Link 2, the Link 3, they usually play Underworld Goddess as well, which really, really helps. And then it's a deck that can play Floodgates. It doesn't lose hard to Shifter. I mean, yeah, Unchained is a good deck, and I think with some of these variants, to especially the Live Twin variant, to boost up its power a bit, that's where we can see it being high tier 2. In fact, I'll actually put it above Heroes. So next up, we've got Labyrinth. I think Labyrinth is tier 1.5. Labyrinth is just, look, whether you're playing Furniture Labyrinth or Floodgate Labyrinth, it's the same thing. It's a hard deck to beat. People aren't going to be prepared for it at the beginning of the format because they have to prepare so many hand traps, and these hand traps don't do much against you. The board breakers that people need to play, things like Dark Ruler, aren't that good against Labyrinth, but they need to play them because of the decks in the format. Definitely one to watch out for. I think Labyrinth is going to be really good. Super Heavy Samurai, I'm going to say it's low rogue, high bad. The problem with Super Heavy Samurai, obviously, is losing that Link 1 sucks. And while it's a good combo deck, it's not an amazing combo deck. And so when you compare it again to the top tier combo decks, it's going to get rattled. Now, it can still make unfair boards, and it can play a lot of hand traps, but not being able to play any spells is going to really hurt this format, as there are some power spells you definitely want to be playing. And so because of that, yeah, low rogue, probably bad. Earth Machine is bad, still bad. Yeah, it's still bad. Mathmech, probably middle to high tier 2. The loss of the 2 circular was actually really huge for Mathmech. It was already not the best deck because it struggled into Kashtira. It didn't have the best kind of game plan against decks like Labyrinth or decks like Runic. And then now it just lost more circular. I mean, yeah, the format's not going to shift enough. If Kashtira leaves the format, it might help it a bit. The Firewall card is good, but Nib is also a problem. And the thing is, having only one circular means that, well, you have like 7, but having only one circular means that you have to do an awkward route a lot of the time and go through your XYZ to get your full combo. Then they hit your XYZ, and Imperm and Veiler on the XYZ is very, very big. Now, it does have an advantage in that it's a deck that one card combo, play a bunch of hand traps. That's going to be amazing, but I still don't think that Mathmech is going to be super, super powerful or a deck that we need to worry about in the format. Sword Soul, it's kind of the always pretty good. High Rogue, low tier 2. It's not a bad deck at all. Yeah, just does the job when it needs to. Altergeist, I think Altergeist is mid rogue. So the problem with the new Altergeist support is that, yeah, it makes it more of a combo deck. Now, there is a way to play Altergeist, I think, which still leans into that kind of stun variant where you focus more on just comboing your turn to kill your opponent. But even then, you're playing loads of traps that are kind of bricky. And then you're also playing loads of monsters that don't fit that. Like, I'd rather just play a bunch of Floodgates with the Altergeist cards, or just play pure combo crazy weird Altergeist, maybe locking the Secret Village. Trying to merge the two isn't ideal, and so I think this is a deck that probably needs to be solved a bit, but even with solving, I don't think it will ever get higher than Rogue. Maybe I'm wrong, but I doubt it. Power Spell Sky Strike, actually, I'm going to put... The thing is, I look at all the tier 2 decks, and I genuinely think Power Spell Striker is the same as these, but I don't think it's the same level as these. So yeah, maybe it's like a better version of Mathmech almost, where it's that mid-range deck. You can play a lot of power spells, you can play a lot of hand traps in it if you want, you can do different things with Sky Strike, and it is a very skill-intensive deck. It isn't going to easily crack those big combo boards, but on average, if Sky Striker comes up against a lot of these decks, it will just win, and it does have good matchups against the 2 top decks in my opinion. Sky Striker can easily just kit their deck to beat a deck like Pearly by playing more Kaijus and things like that if they need to, and Kashtira has always been a pretty straightforward matchup for Sky Striker if it's played well and if they see the power spells they need to see. So I definitely think that, yeah, somewhere in tier 2. Infernoble Knight, so this is probably the worst of the new combo decks, but it's still very good. It sets up a very good board, and it does it consistently. The board isn't as oppressive as the other 2. It tends to be 2 to 3 negates, maybe a pop and so. But it does this very efficiently. On the crackback, a lot of times it can kill you, and it plays your hand traps well. And in fact, I'll correct that. It's not that it plays through hand traps well. It rips your hand. They get Aqua Dolphin, and then they rip the hand traps out of your hand, which makes this deck so hard to deal with. Because your board breakers, if you have them, they will know you have them. And if you don't have board breakers and you have hand traps, you have to hand trap early, which is always going to be suboptimal. So, yeah, definitely a good deck. Not as unfair as the other combo decks, which just flat out don't let you play. But I'd say it's the lowest tier 1.5 deck. I'm going to say Synchron is, for now, below Vanadium, but I think it will end up above Vanadium, depending on how the format progresses. And I think Synchron is just really crazy right now. The new Synchron cards are all really good. Junk Speeder has always been a great card, and the ability to hand loop for 2, 3, 4, 5 cards is insane. I mean, look, that's the best way of beating your opponent. Don't put negates on the board. Just rip the cards out of their hand before they can play. I really feel as though Synchron is a very good deck, but it does need to be explored and tested before it reaches that full potential, and I don't know if it will get there. But still a very good deck. It does suck to play into decks like Kashtira, but it's not completely the end of the world. You can still sometimes put up bodies because you summon a bunch of stuff from deck, you synchro, you don't get follow-up, you don't get bounces and stuff, but you're still playing. And against every other deck, it's pretty good. Vanquisher, I'm going to dump down to tier 2. I think the problem with Vanquisher right now is that it loses a lot of... So we were in a weaker format before. We've moved into a strong, high-intensity combo format, and I just don't think Vanquish Soul can keep up. It can play a lot of hand traps that are good in the format. It can play Bystials, it can play Kurakara, it can play Ash. I don't think that's enough. I don't think it's always going to dominate decks, and so because of that, yeah, somewhere in tier 2. Rika, look... In terms of power level, Rika is somewhere mid-rogue. It's a very easy deck to deal with, but people just don't read Rika cards. People don't, and because of that, I'm actually gonna put it at the bottom of tier 1.5 because people still refuse to read. I was watching a short the other day, and like someone did something like Nib. They had like Nib Gamma and still didn't stop the Rika player because they just did it in the weirdest way. And yeah, this is the eternal thing with Rika. People refuse to learn this deck and refuse to learn how to interrupt it properly, and so I have to give it credit in that. look, if people aren't going to learn the deck, then maybe that's just strength. Maybe, I don't know, people see Primula and they get super excited, I don't know, or something like that. But in any case, Rika is, yeah, bottom of tier 1.5, I would say. Exo Sisters, I think it's rogue. I think the only reason Exo Sisters win is another deck that people don't know well, you don't see often, but it's not that good. You can play a bunch of hand traps or a bunch of board breakers and just kill. It is good at doing that, and if you don't know Exo Sister can do that, you'll fall for it, but it's the kind of thing you only fall for once, I think. So I don't think it's amazing. Dark World, I actually think is one to watch. I think Dark World is really, really good. So Droll and Shifter are in the format, but ignoring Droll and Shifter, Dark World claps a lot of decks. You can fit 3 Lava Golem or 3 Sphere Mode in the main deck and then just destroy a lot of decks. And when Dark World gets rolling, they also hand loop you, so if you don't see the Droll or the Shifter, it's very difficult to play against them. Playing Dangers also means that things like Ash a lot of the times are subpar, because you play like a Danger and then they just keep getting cards. They've put a card on board and drawn a card, there's too many things to hit. Imp and Veiler are good against Dark World, but they're not amazing. It depends on when you hit them, it depends on how good their hand is. And so because of that, in terms of power level, mid tier 2, closer to the top end than the bottom end, but I'd put in one to watch. And I'm actually going to shuffle this a little bit and just to move. Actually, no, I'll leave it. I think my tier 2 is looking okay right now. Marincess, it's another Cyber deck. It's better than Mathmech. Yeah, I'll move Mathmech down. It's better than Mathmech. Probably the best Cyber deck. I don't know. I don't think any of the Cyber decks are particularly good right now. But yeah, it's probably better than Mathmech. I don't know. They're the same thing. They're just not that good. Don't play them. Virtual World, I think, is still bad. It bricks. Yeah. Virtual World is like, and Flander are very similar in that these decks should both be amazing because they just have so many unique ways of recurring their own resources, interesting looks, but they lose to themselves. Now, Virtual World has more of a win condition than Flander, especially with Crimson Dragon, but the problem with Virtual World has never really been the end board. They've always been able to do interesting end boards. The problem has always been sometimes you just lose. Another thing is that Droplets, which is probably one of the best cards in Virtual World and it allows it to really play second going well with Engine, Droplets doesn't really work in a Kashtira format or a format with Shifter. So until then, Virtual World's going to be bad. It might creep up to Rogue if Kashtira leaves the format. But yeah. Trap Chicks, yeah, somewhere mid to bottom. Rogue hasn't changed much. Telements is another one I would say that we should have in our one to watch. In terms of power level, hard to say. High Rogue, low tier 2. The thing about Telements that's so cool is that you can fit so many different engines into it, and it facilitates so many other decks. So one thing we're seeing now is people playing Revolution Synchron in TL, which is a really, really good tech for TL. However, Kashtira, blah, 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 that sucks. Also, these uncrackable boards going second. Before, full power tier could have easily played through these boards. New tier can't play through them well. If your opponent's got like 2 or 3 monster negates, that's half your fusion's gone. Do you get it? You're not playing anymore. And that's kind of a big problem with tier. I've just realised as well, Illusion isn't on this list, but I think Illusion sucks. I think Illusion would be mid-rogue. It's just shit branded. But yeah, Ignista. Yeah, Ignista is another Cyber deck. I don't know. Somewhere at the bottom of tier 2. I haven't played in a while. I'm actually going to put Ignista in rogue. I don't even think it's tier 2. I think in a format with Droll, in a format with Shifter, in a format with these decks, it's not amazing. And then people are playing Kaijus because the top decks both aren't good into Kaijus. So unfortunately, it's not great. Drytron, I also think, is going to be low rogue, high bad. It just so many things hard counter Drytron that are in the format. We need a bit of a cleanup of the ban list. There are too many. If you're a graveyard-centric deck right now, it's very easy to get pushed out of the format. I think Drytron's a really good example because Bestial sucks for it, Shifter sucks for it, Droll sucks for it, things like even Chowfing and stuff like that sucks for it. I mean, there's just so many different ways to say no to a Drytron player. You could Dweller them, for example, and that sucks. And I think we need a bit of a shake-up because some of these floodgates are going to... Like, Drytron is a good deck in terms of its core. It's a strong combo deck. It's got interesting mechanics, can do cool things. But it just loses to so many no buttons that it's like you can't even worry about your opponent having a hand trap. It's like your opponent just might have a floodgate that just wins the matchup, which is a bit unfair. Tistina is absolutely bad. I don't know why that deck even exists. I think it's terrible. Rescue Ace. So look, I'm someone who absolutely loves Rescue Ace. I've been playing the heck out of it. Go and check my channel if you want to see loads of videos on it. But in my opinion, right now, I would say it's mid to high tier 2, and I don't see that changing. I don't see that changing. Last format, if we had this Rescue Ace, it might be T1.5, but I would say Rescue Ace, and I was talking to my friend today, is just a different variant. It's like Sky Striker and Mathmech put together almost, and it has a lot of problems, but I'd say the biggest issue of Rescue Ace right now, really comes down to the fact that your win condition is not that strong. Set 4 Turbulence is nice. It does not always win when you compare it with some of the other decks. And then it also loses things like Ash Blossom and Imperm or whatever. You can't play through hand traps as well as you'd like to in this all the time. Well, I love this deck, and I'm going to be playing it for this whole format. I definitely think mid-tier 2 probably is about where it fits. Branded, I'm going to say for now is going to be tier 1.5. It might slip down into tier 2 depending on where the format goes. It can break boards really cool. The only problem with Branded is it doesn't do well in hand trap formats, especially because it can't play hand traps, and so that's going to hurt it a little bit, but definitely an interesting deck. And our last one to watch is going to be Branded Synchro. So I say this is Branded Synchro, but maybe Bestial Synchro is a better word, but this is like with the Quems, the Cartesia, Branded Etude. This is one to watch, and my honest answer is I don't know where the heck this goes. My instinct would say it would be somewhere mid-tier 2, low-tier 2, but I think it might have potential. I saw this just before DUNE released, and I saw some really cool things that I think it was Nesh on DB Grinder's channel doing some things with it. I do think that's going to be an interesting deck to watch. They can put up some cool boards. They might even be able to make Crimson Dragon or something. Who knows? But yeah, one to watch. It might be a cool deck. But for now, mid-tier 2. Then Dragon Link, lastly, I think is going to be our last tier 2 deck. And I think if we look at the tier 2 decks as well, I'd probably put Dragon Link in the middle, and I'd probably put Rika and Infernoble at the bottom. Yeah, this would be a more... So yeah, Dragon Link. Dragon Link is good. It was really good last format. I think it's still a good combo deck this format. I don't think it's as good as Synchron or Mannadium. I do think it's better than an Infernoble. I think another nice thing about Dragon Link is it has Borrowland, which is just a good card for clearing big boards of monsters. When your opponent has 50,000 monsters on the board, if you can just Dark Ruler them or whatever and then Borrowland clear the whole board, that is great. And then being able to play off 1 or 2 cards is good. I also think there's probably a world where this deck can play with Revolution Synchron. We saw some people putting Assault Synchrons or Revolution Synchrons with Dragons instead of playing Rockets, and so we might see that trend continue in the deck develops. We might see some sort of combination of this with the new Synchron piles. But yeah, Dragon Link somewhere in the mid-tier 1.5. So guys, this is the format. So as we can see, I would say it's a relatively diverse format at the moment. It is going to trend kind of more towards these 4 decks as the ones you need to worry about, but it's still better than it's been in a while. Thank you all for watching. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel and like if you want more content, and I'll talk to you all soon. Peace.